Automated corporate accounting systems have successfully reclassified an $8 billing discrepancy as a terminal medical event. The date is Monday, July 6th, 2026, and my name is Lambert Woollingham. The Daily Share will now document the 4-year lifespan of a neighbourhood ruin, the automated termination of senior healthcare coverage, and the sudden vulnerability of global soccer regulations to American executive pressure. The physical reality of the future is currently colliding with the limits of local infrastructure. Texas has officially cemented its status as the nation's premier host for high-yield server farms, and now the state has to figure out how to keep those massive facilities running. Nearly half of all new power plants proposed in the United States to supply electricity for artificial intelligence are slated for construction within Texas borders. Environmental experts are warning that this influx of dedicated power facilities will trigger a massive spike in regional greenhouse gas emissions, fundamentally undermining broader climate goals. State leadership remains eager to boast about corporate relocations, treating the immense environmental cost of a frictionless digital economy as a purely administrative concern. This physical strain on the grid brings an update to the municipal boundaries of San Marcos. State Senator Paul Bettencourt has formally challenged the city's newly enacted ban on data center developments, arguing that the restrictive zoning amendment directly conflicts with state law and exceeds local legal authority. The state government is now maneuvering to pry open local borders for highly profitable server farms, proving that local control is considered a basic sovereign right only until it mildly inconveniences the tech industry. The impending legal dispute will likely dictate whether any local government can successfully refuse the physical demands of artificial intelligence. The city of Austin has finally ordered the demolition of a heavily decayed residential property in the upscale Bryker Woods neighborhood, proving the immense bureaucratic friction required to force action on a single residential lot. Neighbours spent dozens of months petitioning local officials over severe rodent infestations and general property abandonment, while the absentee owner demanded that the dilapidated structure remain standing as lawyers contested the municipal citations. It seems that private neglect can easily outlast standard code enforcement protocols, leaving residents to absorb the collateral damage of a hazard while city inspectors systematically document the obvious decay. Residents are now waiting to see if the bulldozers will actually arrive or if another round of legal injunctions will keep the ruin intact. The 4th of July holiday predictably resulted in a massive municipal sweep for illicit explosives across North Texas, as residents entirely ignored standardized safety warnings. Coordinated raids by Dallas Fire Rescue and the Dallas Police Department seized more than 1,800 pounds of illegal fireworks over the weekend from individuals attempting to stockpile and distribute the inventory. The near-ton of confiscated material proves that a persistent, large-scale black market operates comfortably just outside the boundaries of official enforcement. Despite the high-profile interception, local emergency rooms still spent the remainder of the weekend managing the inevitable physical fallout from the vast inventory that authorities failed to capture in time. Newly released administrative records reveal a grim pattern of severe operational failures leading up to the death of an immigrant detained at Camp East, Montana in West Texas. Documents indicate that the detainee repeatedly reported deteriorating mental health conditions to facility staff, who consistently failed to provide adequate medical intervention or basic psychological support. The subsequent investigation into the custodial death points to systemic neglect within the observation and care protocols of the detention center firmly validating long-standing concerns from human rights advocates. The fatal outcome is the direct mathematical consequence of understaffing massive custodial camps while intentionally isolating vulnerable populations far away from standard medical oversight. The global market remains an incredibly efficient mechanism for converting political anxiety into direct financial leverage. The European Union is escalating its trade defense against Beijing by zeroing in on a dominant supplier of global security infrastructure. Nuctech, a Chinese state-backed manufacturer of cargo scanners and border security equipment, has become the primary target of regulatory scrutiny over allegations of illegal state subsidies. The company has aggressively expanded its footprint across European ports and airports by severely undercutting domestic competitors. Western governments are suddenly discovering the acute anxiety of relying on foreign state-sponsored hardware to constantly monitor their most sensitive logistical checkpoints. The looming restrictions have sparked immediate warnings from Beijing regarding retaliatory tariffs on Western goods. We have an update on the financial trajectory of European aviation. After dismissing a string of increasingly aggressive buyout attempts, the British budget airline EasyJet has agreed in principle to a £5.2 billion takeover by the American private equity firm Castlelake. The carrier's board had previously rejected 4 consecutive offers, arguing that the United States investors were undervaluing the company's post-pandemic recovery. The newly accepted valuation finally bridges the gap between the airline's independent ambitions and the cold, unyielding reality of private equity persistence. The successful acquisition will grant Castlelake massive leverage in the European short-haul market, further shifting the control of the continent's logistical backbone over to distant American holding companies. A minor administrative adjustment to federal health coverage has quietly stripped thousands of senior citizens of their prescription drug access. Medicare beneficiaries enrolled in private $0 premium plans operated by major insurers suddenly lost their coverage after their monthly rates increased by as little as $8 without their realization. Because the policyholders failed to remit the minimal new balances, automated billing systems promptly cancelled their medical safety nets without any human review. Thousands of affected seniors are now completely locked out of the prescription insurance market until the next enrollment window opens. The mass terminations are a brutal demonstration of how automated corporate accounting treats vulnerable populations, instantly voiding essential medical access over a discrepancy that costs less than a cup of coffee. The Internal Oversight Division of Immigration and Customs Enforcement has expanded its operational scope to aggressively monitor the agency's online detractors. The Office of Professional Responsibility has formally opened more than 100 investigative cases targeting individuals who criticize the agency on the internet, classifying the digital hostility as actionable threats against federal employees. Privacy advocates warn that the agency is effectively weaponizing its internal security apparatus to intimidate activists and chill legitimate public dissent regarding government deportation operations. The initiative neatly blurs the line between internal workforce protection and the active, formalized surveillance of domestic political opposition. The exploding consumer demand for flavored nicotine pouches has triggered a massive industrial expansion across the legacy tobacco sector. Philip Morris International and other major manufacturers are rapidly constructing new production facilities to keep up with the soaring sales of Zyn and similar smoke-free oral stimulants. The frictionless products have found a massive audience among younger demographics, heavily amplified by social media influencers who routinely market the pouches as a productivity hack or a wellness accessory. Corporate executives are eagerly pouring vast amounts of capital into this largely unregulated frontier, aiming to replace combustible tobacco with a more socially acceptable chemical dependency before regulators can act. The massive manufacturing scale-up is designed to offset terminal declines in traditional cigarette revenue while federal agencies scramble to draft rules. National borders are proving to be highly porous to both amateur aviation and targeted executive leverage. The Democratic primary for a crucial open Senate seat in Michigan has abruptly narrowed into a stark ideological binary. State Senator Mallory McMorrow has officially suspended her campaign, abandoning her attempt to chart a centre-left path to the nomination in the must-win race to replace retiring Democrat Gary Peters. The withdrawal strongly suggests that moderate, triangulating appeals are fundamentally struggling to gain any traction in highly polarized midterm primary environments. Her exit leaves primary voters with a direct choice between the party's entrenched establishment wing, represented by centrist Representative Haley Stevens, and its highly motivated progressive flank, championed by former public health official Abdul El-Sayed. In an unprecedented display of geopolitical leverage applied to international sports, FIFA has abruptly overturned a World Cup red card suspension for American star striker Folarin Balogun. The governing body nullified the mandatory penalty following a direct telephone call from President Trump, allowing the leading scorer to take the pitch in a crucial knockout match against Belgium. European soccer officials and the Belgian national team immediately erupted in fury over the decision, describing the executive intervention as a blatant violation of standard disciplinary rules. The administrative capitulation establishes an entirely new precedent regarding the severe vulnerability of global sports governance to raw political pressure. Federal law enforcement agencies have spent the last month engaged in a high-stakes, quiet air war against amateur aviators flying above the nation's sporting venues. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Homeland Security confirmed they have actively seized more than 600 unauthorized drones flying through restricted airspace over World Cup matches across all 11 host cities in the United States. The massive haul reveals the immense logistical difficulty of securing open-air stadiums against cheap, commercially available consumer technology. Counter-terrorism units are now permanently forced to continuously scan the skies and deploy jamming equipment to neutralize potential aerial threats that are poorly disguised as overeager sports photography. The Chinese military has executed a highly provocative display of its strategic strike capabilities by successfully test-firing a long-range ballistic missile from a nuclear submarine directly into the Pacific Ocean. The unannounced military exercise served as a blunt demonstration of Beijing's expanding naval deterrence and its ability to project nuclear-capable force far beyond its immediate territorial waters. The rare open ocean launch immediately rattled regional capitals, arriving just as Australia secures additional defence agreements with Pacific Island nations to counter Chinese influence. The manoeuvre significantly complicates Western defence strategies, cementing the reality of a survivable nuclear triad capable of striking global targets at a moment's notice. The deeply fractured political landscape of the Philippines has officially entered a constitutional crisis as the Senate formally opens the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte. The explosive proceedings will determine whether to permanently bar Duterte from public office over sweeping allegations of institutional corruption and issuing direct death threats against sitting President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The trial marks the terminal collapse of the formidable political alliance between the two powerful dynasties that entirely dominated the nation's last general election. Legal analysts fully expect the trial to be intensely volatile, relying far more on partisan maneuvering and public spectacle than any strict evidentiary review. We are currently preparing to build dozens of dedicated fossil fuel power plants across Texas to keep up with the immense electricity demands of automated processing centers. The state will endure a massive spike in regional greenhouse gas emissions simply to ensure these server farms can operate without interruption. The fundamental promise of this vast infrastructure is that frictionless, high-speed computation will manage our complex systems with perfect efficiency. And the primary achievement of this frictionless, high-speed computation is to scan millions of medical records, locate an 80-year-old who failed to notice an $8 premium increase buried in their mail, and instantly sever their access to prescription drugs. We are boiling the local atmosphere to power a machine that calculates the exact moment it becomes unprofitable to keep a human being alive for $8, and then quietly terminates the account. Your minor administrative oversight has been permanently logged. There is no appeal process. I am Lambert Woollingham, and I would advise you not to fly any amateur aviation equipment within a 5-mile radius of my pasture. The day has been shorn until tomorrow.